I like that system of having the queen in the excluder partition with 3 combs, and every 8 days I put a new comb in there and move a comb with sealed brood to the other side of the excluder. It works great for about the first 2, 3, or maybe 4 8-day sessions. After that, the box starts getting too crowded. You can take brood out, but they still start to build up too many field bees. Whenever there's a honey flow, just every empty cell in the hive just whoosh starts to fill up with honey, and all of a sudden there's no place for the queen to lay eggs at just the right time. So I'm trying to try different ways of getting around that problem. Just the last couple of years I've been using a even simpler system where when I find the breeder queen in an apiary, usually in a 2-story colony, so that queen will be 3 years old and spent her part of her first summer in the nucleus colony, overwintered. That first winter in the nucleus colony, spent her second season in a honey-producing colony that had really good results, a good crop of honey and a healthy brood nest the following spring. And so then she'd be in her 3rd year, and I'd take her out of that honey-producing colony in the spring. What I'm doing now is just to take 1 frame of the queen bee for a good frame of brood and to put it into just a hive body with a bottom board, and a good frame of honey and pollen, good food right next to that comb, and then 1 frame of foundation. And then I shake 3 or 4 more frames of brood into that box from the same colony. And then I re-queen that donor colony and take the queen, the breeder queen, with her bees and this little nuke to the cell building yard. And this is usually some weeks before I start the actual cell building process. And then I just let those little nukes build up at their own rate, just giving them a new comb of foundation whenever they need it. And they're pretty small to begin with, and they just gradually build up throughout the cell building season. So by the end of the season, I use 6 cycles of that 8-day system. And by the end of that time, they just build that box, or sometimes they start at the layout. Sometimes I'll have to add an extra 2nd box depending on the conditions. But then I just hunt through those colonies to find the comb where she laid the eggs at the right time for grafting. It's not as easy to graft. It's much harder to graft from those new combs, the white combs. That's the drawback to the whole thing. But I think it treats that breeder colony better. The queen is much more liable to blast into another season, and it's simpler. It takes out 1 step of putting the comb into the colony. So anyway, just to give you an idea, there's different ways you can do that. There's nothing at all wrong with having a breeder colony in your bee yard, a colony you like, you want to breed from, in a 2-story colony, and hunting through there to find the frames with the larvae that are the right age. And these are just the regular JZs, BZs, plastic queen cell cups lots of people use. I went through the same process that a lot of people did. I used to make my cell cups from my own wax, and I thought that must be the best way to use fresh cappings wax and make the cups and put them on the bars. And all of a sudden, and this was before the tracheal mite even arrived, all of a sudden one day I did a graft and the bees did not accept it. And just 1 or 2 cells where I usually get 70 or 80% of them at least accepted. They said, what in the world is wrong? And tried again, same thing, they wouldn't accept the cells. I didn't know what else to do, just sort of in desperation. I made up some new wax cups from a different piece of wax. The bees just hooked them all right away like normal. Something had gotten into that piece of wax I made those cups from. And, this, like I say, this was before the tracheal mites, before Varroa, before we were using any kind of chemicals in the hive. And I don't have an explanation for what happened to that wax. I always try to be really careful with it and use only the best capping wax. It should be the cleanest. It's just another one one of these disturbing things out, shows the environment is contaminated and it's getting into the beehive and harming them. So anyway, that's when I switched to these plastic cell cups, and they work great. I like these wide base style ones. You just have a saw curve in the bar, and you push them in. They're very easy to set up. And this is the frame. I use the whole 3 bars. They each have 16 cell cups on them. And this is the tool I use for grafting. It's just a homemade thing made out of baling wire. Just pound it down with a hammer on top of a little anvil or even a metal vise, and then file down to a tiny point. I just try to just a very tiny point at the end, just big enough to feed George a little oatmeal or something, because he didn't have any teeth. And so anyway, the main thing to think about with grafting, I just do regular dry grafting. I don't prime the cells or anything. I think the important thing is having the cell building colonies set up right, and to do the grafting and put the cells directly into the cell building colonies. This just shows how I use for my large batches of cells, I use groups of 8 colonies for each batch. So each time all 8 colonies are worked the same way. And if I find something wrong with one of the colonies that's not suitable for cell building, I just switch it with another colony, the group I keep in reserve for that, so that all the colonies will be the same, and one of them won't attract all the field bees or anything like that. And so this is, I usually calculate on the basis of putting in a graft of about 50 cells and getting at least 30 cells from each cell builder. Usually the number is higher than that, sometimes quite a bit higher, but that's what I use as a basis. So so each batch of cells, 250 to 300 cells each time is what I'm doing. And here I just want to show you this contraption that I use for working the 2-story colonies. You can see a little bit better the next. It's just a little bench with one end offset sticking out, and that little piece of plywood making a lip at the end to grab the colony. And you just leave it on the ground right behind the colony. You tip the colony back onto that little rim, and then with one hand on the bottom board, the other hand on the top of the bench, you can just with one finger tip the colony up. And get those boxes up off the ground at a comfortable height to work with them, to examine them. And they can both lie down flat on there, or one can stay up. Again, you can learn a lot more about the colony from looking up from the bottom than you can by looking down to the top. This makes an easy way to do that, and this is what I use. I use them in the spring. I use them when we're making hives for equalizing the colonies, and I use them during for setting up the cell builders. And this is a good way of seeing initially the condition of the colony, how strong they are, whether they've started any queen cells. And this is basically what I start with for a cell building colony. It's just a 2-story, regular, strong 2-story colony of bees with the bees filling the whole 2 box is the ideal situation. And oftentimes I'll add some frames of brood to this colony to bring it up to this strength that's actually easier than letting them get ahead of you and then having to cut the queen cells out of them. But again, so this initial, I call the setup step, you do 10 days before you want to graft, and you just find a colony like this and ascertain they have no preparations for swarming underway. This is more of a problem with the Russian bees I have now than it is with Italian bees. It used to be really easy. You can just look at the colony just like this and be almost certain if you didn't see any queen cells that there weren't any underway. That's not always true of Russian bees, and so I do often look at all the combs with the bees I have now. But anyway, then just put the queen bee down into the bottom box, either by finding her and actually putting her down there, or by shaking all the bees from the top box down into the bottom. You don't have to be too concerned with where the brood is. If it's a normal brood nest, it usually has brood in all stages in both boxes. Anything close to that will work just fine. And then on the day before grafting, so 9 days after you did that initial setup, you just go through the top box. Don't need to look at the bottom box. Go through the top box and destroy any queen cells that they have started in that box. And you have to be sure to do this. If anyone is left, then your new queen cells will be destroyed by the bees or by the virgin that's in there. So I don't lift the box or anything, but I shake some of the bees off of each frame, make sure that no queen cells started on those combs, destroy any that are. And then the next day, the next morning is the grafting day. Come in the morning and take that top box, which now has all sealed brood in it, no young brood at all, no unsealed brood, and honey and pollen. Set that temporarily off to the side and take the bottom box, which has the queen and brood in all stages, set that up on the horse right next to, and put the top box down in the original position. So that top box now becomes the cell builder. And what you're doing with the bottom box with the queen is shaking some of the young bees in there that are feeding that young brood into the cell builder. Make sure that you have a lot of young bees to feed the queen cells. And that's the only secret to getting really good queen cells. Make sure you have lots of young bees. They're actively processing honey or syrup and feeding brood with nothing else to do except to start those queen cells. And so I shake about five frames of the bees from the queen right box into the bottom box. And this is an old-fashioned shaker box that Evan Weaver gave me years ago that they used to use at Weaver apiaries. Now they have some aluminum ones, but anyway, this is one of my most prized possessions. I use it all the time. And so you just shake the frames of bees into there. If the queen is there, she'll show up as the bees are going through the excluder, and pick her up and put her back in the box with the brood. Then I take those boxes of brood with the queen and just some of the worker bees, put them on the truck, put screens at the entrance, put them on the truck and take them to a different location. That works really well. Michael Palmer is now using a system where he leaves them in the bee yard, but he